And we're back with Sarah Block from the Tiny Marketing Podcast for part 2 of the episode. We had a little technical difficulty, but we are back and we're going to keep this marketing conversation going for course creators and agencies. Um, Sarah, you mentioned on your site that you're very cognizant of doing marketing without burning out.
hmm Yeah.
What causes people to burn out when doing marketing for their courses or their agency, and how can they avoid that?
Yeah. Well, I have 100% experienced burnout before. And in my experience, it's always been because I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. So I was trying a little bit of everything and I was doing a lot of testing. And that really burned me out because I was like, I'm just going to try these things and see if they work. So what works best for me to avoid out is having that strategy in place, a plan in place, and breaking it down into quarterly tasks. This is what I need to do to move the needle and meet these goals. And then it feels really tangible. Like I can do that. This I can do. And then I just set up batching. I set up batching times to do it. And I even do that really with my client work. I set up intensives for them. So I'm batching all of their work and I batch my own. Like this week is reserved for Sarah stuff. This is operations and marketing week. And then I'll batch all of my marketing then. And that really helps. But also just having a system in place is a great way to avoid burnout. If you have your project management tool and your automations set up, like if you do pretty consistent, let's say you have a podcast, for example, the same tasks are involved in every single podcast. Set up the template so you can automatically have all of those things set up in your project management tool, assigned to the right people, the due dates are correct. You can do that all in your project management tool. And it saves you so much time, makes it a lot easier.
What about repurposing? Like, let's say you do a really good webinar, you have a podcast, or you're creating videos. How do you actually repurpose all that stuff, or not let it just kind of die on the vine and just
Yeah,
disappear forever?
you
Yeah.
got to repurpose everything. So, my rule is have one core piece of content you're willing to commit to. Let's say we'll go back to the podcast example. Let's say you have committed to doing 2 podcasts a month, bi-weekly podcast. I can handle that and I'm good. But take that video from the podcast and repurpose it. You can use tools like Descript, which will be super easy because you can take little sound bites and create social media graphics from it. You can quickly turn it into reels or TikToks just by changing the orientation of it. You can also use tools like Opus AI, which actually takes AI. You just put your video in there and it will find the hooks for you and it will create everything for you. It'll even add graphics and it'll add your what you were saying, closed captioning right in there. So within 5 minutes, you've repurposed your podcast into 12 new videos that you can use to promote that main podcast. That's the point of repurposing, by the way. It's all about distribution, getting everybody to that core piece of content.
That's awesome. And you said Opus AI, that's OPUS.ai, is that right?
OPUS, yes. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I was just pulling it out. So many AI tools out there. It's so awesome.
Oh my gosh. And trust me, I am a chronic beta tester where I have tested them all.
Well, so on that note, what are some of your favorites? Like, what do you use?
Toasty AI. I love. So I've tested a lot of AI around podcasting because, well, that's my core piece of content and I want to do it as quickly as possible. So I'll take my podcast and I'll put it in there and it will create an article in my voice from
Like
the
a blog
contents on
post?
there. Yeah, it's
Oh,
good.
okay.
It's good. It will create the show notes page for me. It'll create social media posts for me. And it also has like a ChatGPT function where you can ask it to do additional things. So, I I forgot the best part, the timestamps and highlights. It'll tell you the timestamps and highlights that you should put in your show notes page. And it'll also give you the transcript for your podcast. And it takes like 5 minutes.
Wow. That's really impressive.
That one's my favorite of the podcasting repurposing AI.
That's toastyai.com. Any other AI tools you love?
There is another one I love. It's Pod something. I have to look it up. But so I don't like it as much as Toasty. But the thing that it does that Toasty doesn't do is it finds all of the resources that you mentioned in the podcast, which is really helpful because I'm always like, what? Sometimes I'm like, because I batch record my episodes, I'll record an episode in January and it doesn't go live until August. I'm like, what was in there? What resources did we mention? And that tool, I think it's Podbean. I'll have to look it up. But that tool finds the resources that you mentioned. And then earlier I was talking about Bing AI, which is totally different world than ChatGPT because it'll do internet searches. So all of the information is researched that you get from it. So I really like that.
That's awesome. Well, tell us if people want to connect with you, tell us more about your podcast show. And then if people want to work with you on marketing, what does that look like and where should they go?
Yeah. So my podcast is the Tiny Marketing Show, and it's everywhere that you're listening to podcasts. And you can go to sarahnoelblock.com to work with me. If you reached out to me, then you would find out the first thing that we do is we work on a workshop together to build out your brand messaging on a page so we can get started there. And then next up is your strategic story, where we build out your entire strategy and the execution plan. So I don't leave you high and dry with your strategy collecting dust on your drive. You actually get execution too.
Wow, that's awesome. So that's sarahnoelblock.com. Check out the Tiny Marketing Podcast. Sarah, thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for adding so much value on this episode. We really appreciate it. And we'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.